All in all, tomorrow's Republican response is shaping up to be a lot more revealing about the opposition to health care reform than tonight's formal Republican response. And I mean that in not at all a good way. Joining us now is Congressman Barney Frank, Democrat of Massachusetts. He is chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks for making time to come on the show. It's nice to meet you in person.
Thank you.
Let me ask you about something that happened tonight that was unexpected and that I didn't expect to have to ask anybody about. A Republican member of Congress named Joe Wilson from South Carolina screamed, "You lie," at the president tonight, interrupting his speech. Is this an ignore the tantrum moment, or is that a big deal?
Oh, I don't think it's a big deal. Look, I think free speech is, well, you know, heckling is a tradition, obviously, in the British Parliament. They even have mics that come down to hear the heckles. I think what we should take it as, it is unusual. It's a sign of how effective the president was. These guys just couldn't handle it. I looked at John Boehner, and he looked about as glum and dour as it possibly could be. So what Joe Wilson did was just scream out in frustration because the president was nailing them. You know, we ought to be very clear. Wilson lied when he said the president lied. They talk about illegal immigrants. It's clearly excluded from the bill. So I would say what Wilson did was a mark of their frustration. And, you know, Barack Obama is a big boy. I think, I must say, that any Republican, particularly Joe Wilson, who wanted to get into a debate with Barack Obama, is tugging on Superman's cape and pulling the Lone Ranger's mask, but if that's what he wants to do, free country.
Well, the Republicans tonight, in a more sober response, are asking for everything to start over again. They're saying, let's go back to square one. They say that's what Americans are demanding, that everything that's happened so far has been wrong-footed and we ought to restart.
Well, what they really want to do is to go back to square one in terms of the election. I mean, you know, one of the things you ought to be very clear, people said this have to be bipartisan. Let's be very clear. This insistence on bipartisanship really goes against the notion of democracy. We had an election in 2008, and the Democrats won the presidency, significant majorities in the House and the Senate. We don't all agree on everything, but there were clear differences. There were clear differences, and one of the great things the president did today, and I didn't agree with everything he said, but he articulated the philosophy of a liberal governance in a very good way about what's the private sector, public sector interrelationship. The Republicans represent an extremely conservative faction. The notion that those of us who won the election with a solid majority should compromise 50-50 with those who lost. Well, then why have elections? Why not just have like a color war? Let's make it camp, and you know, it just didn't make any sense. And this notion of starting from scratch, in the first place, well, I've already had a first place. I got to get to the second place. If they wanted to start from scratch, why didn't they? They haven't put anything forward. What's been stopping them from January of this year from coming forward with their plan? The answer is they really don't have anything constructive to do.
When the president was talking about liberalism tonight, about the idea of that government has a constructive role to play, I thought that was important, just not even in terms of health care, but just in terms of his presidency, because I haven't heard him make that argument before.
No, and look, it's particularly relevant to the thing I have to be working on now, which is financial regulation. Yeah. I mean, Ronald Reagan in 1981, his first inaugural, my first year in Congress, said, government is not the answer to our problems. Government is the problem. Of course, switched to the Bush administration when they were running up down Wall Street saying, we're from the government, we're here to help you. But it was the absence of government not restraining the excesses of the financial sector that caused this great problem we're in. And yeah, the president hadn't done that. And it's interesting that he did that at the same time. This annoyed me a little bit. It was this, oh, you on the left and you on the right. It was kind of like, I'm above the battle. I think the president underestimated when he came to office exactly how right-wing the Republicans are. And I'm glad he asked them today to join. I have no great hopes for it because they are in the control of the most conservative. Knowing how right-wing the Republican Party has become, my only bad moment with Barack Obama during the campaign was when he said he was going to be post-partisan, and I got post-partisan depression because I knew that that meant dealing with these people. So I think it was, in effect, I guess I'm talking too much, their extreme reactionary posture forced him to articulate what he may have previously thought we could take for granted, this liberal approach to a private sector, public sector cooperation. And I agree with you, he did it very well.
One of the things that I thought was interesting in the sense that it was thought-provoking and not at all, on the surface level, obvious what he meant when he was doing that riff about the importance of governance and about the idea that of liberalism as something that ought not be conflated with big government. It should be seen as springing from a desire to help one's fellow man and help one's fellow citizens. One of the things he said is that we will sometimes say that timidity is the only form of wisdom. And it seemed to me that that was the unexpected shot in the middle of that. Again,
I think they forced him to get to the basics. I think he may have thought that they were more reasonable than they are. This collection of loons that you scroll down there. I got to say, those people, if anybody needs a health plan in America, it's those people who are in severe need of mental health services. This lunacy about mandatory abortions and death penalties. By the way, yeah, there is a political faction in America that would have the government intervene in that what should be the most private moment for people when they are dealing with the last breaths, with when death is there. And that is an intensely private thing, and government shouldn't be in it. But it was the right wing in the Terry Schiavo case that got involved in this. So if you do believe that government should stay out of that terribly intimate decision, then the people of fear are those right-wingers who drove the Schiavo bill.
But the one thing that is very rational in their decision-making about what to do about health care reform is that they are making a ton of money off of it, that they have energized their own base, that they have sort of brought the Christian right back to life, at least in their own estimation. They think that this is a big issue for them, not necessarily because they're going to win, but because it's going to stoke people up that are going to support them as the fringe.
Coming back to life is, after all, a very fundamental part of Christian doctrine. Yeah, I think it's a nice blend for them of cynicism and stupidity. Some of them know better. Some of these people talk about death penalties. I think when I get into some of what Newt Gingrich said, he's a smart man who's just being cynical. Some of them are just dumb and don't understand this. But I will say this is the one thing I take comfort for. When I'm in a debate with people, if they are making cogent points against what I think is very important, I get a little nervous. I noticed last week in the New York Times that the responsible conservatives have started to complain now that the arguments against the Obama plan and against our effort to do health care are being dominated by the crazies. Well, that's their fault. They were very happy to have the crazies getting out there doing Hitler stuff and et cetera. But I think the problem is they don't have good arguments. When people make ridiculous arguments against something, it's because that's all they got. Yeah. So they can't deny that it would be good to improve healthcare's efficiency or to extend it to people who can't have it or to protect people against arbitrary cancellations from the private companies. So they come up with death penalties or death panels and mandatory abortions. The very weakness of their argument is a testimony to the strength of ours.
Congressman Barney Frank, Democrat of Massachusetts, Chairman of the Banking Committee. It's really nice to see you in person.
It's nice to have you to Washington. Come back again.
I will do. Thank you.